Welcome, everyone. We are stepping back into a really pivotal era of American media history, specifically that 9-year run between 1989 and 1998. We're going to explore one of the most culturally significant and, I think, structurally unique sitcoms ever created, Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
It spanned 180 episodes, running on NBC, and it established a cultural footprint so massive that it permanently changed how we observe and talk about daily life.
It really did.
And today, we aren't just recounting episode plots.
Hmm.
We're going to meticulously dissect the creative philosophy, the production struggles, and the lasting legacy, the very cultural scaffolding that allowed this show to redefine television comedy entirely.
That's a perfect way to frame this. We're moving beyond the laughs, beyond the specific absurd scenarios to conduct an analysis of how this program became such a phenomenon.
Right.
Our mission is to look at its history, to understand the almost fanatical creative philosophy that governed its entire run, and to explain why its influence, linguistic, commercial, and structural, remains so profoundly felt today, over 2 decades after it signed off.
And at the center of this cultural shift were 4 individuals. Jerry Seinfeld, portraying a fictionalized version of himself. His best friend, George Costanza, played by Jason Alexander. His former girlfriend, Elaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And, of course, the ultimate agent of chaos, Cosmo Kramer, played by Michael Richards.
And their world, it primarily revolved around Jerry's sparsely decorated, meticulously clean apartment in Manhattan's Upper West Side.
That's right.
It's crucial, though, to address the immediate paradox that surrounds the show. For years, the shorthand description has been that Seinfeld was a show about nothing.
The famous tagline.
Exactly. But if you look at the origins, the creators, Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, they always offered a more complex explanation. Jerry Seinfeld repeatedly maintained that the actual pitch to NBC in 1988 was built around observation. He said, we want to show how a comedian gets this material.
Which implies that the entire exercise was about the meticulous and often painful process of observing everything.
Precisely. And Larry David, he also pushed back hard against that show about nothing label. He suggested it was inherently about something because their focus was on mining humor from the worst qualities that a person has. David reasoned that by trying to be genuinely funny, they ended up dealing with things that are profoundly real. The neuroses, the petty indignities, and all the flaws of contemporary human reality.
Okay, let's unpack this history then, because the origin story is one of, rejection and near instant cancellation. It started as a short 23-minute pilot initially titled The Seinfeld Chronicles.
That pilot was the purest expression of David and Seinfeld's vision. It established that groundbreaking format that mixed Seinfeld's observational stand-up with those unique, highly idiosyncratic conversational scenes. Scenes focused entirely on life's most mundane, trivial aspects, like arguing over the etiquette of buttoning the top button on a shirt or attempting to decode hidden messages in social interactions.
It was completely unique for the late 1980s television landscape.
Utterly unique.
And there was a wonderful bit of production lore attached to that first shoot.
Yep.
The pilot was filmed at Stage 8 of Desluca Studios, which holds a lot of significance in sitcom history.
That's right. It was the same soundstage where the Dick Van Dyke Show was filmed, a huge, successful ensemble sitcom from a previous generation.
Wow.
And the crew, many of whom were veterans of television, they viewed this location as a very good omen. They believed it imbued the project with a kind of positive energy.
And they certainly needed that good omen because the initial corporate reception was disastrous.
Disaster is the only word for it. When that pilot was first screened for NBC executives in Burbank in early 1989, it just landed with a thud.
No laughs.
It failed to generate the massive, immediate laughter that NBC had become accustomed to with powerhouses like The Cosby Show and The Golden Girls.
The feedback from the network brass was intensely critical.
It was. Brandon Tartikoff, who was the head of NBC at the time, he reportedly characterized the show as too New York, too Jewish, suggesting it lacked a broad national appeal. But the real blow came from the test audience responses. They were summarized in a research department memo that Warren Littlefield, a key executive, later referred to as a dagger to the heart.
Those specific audience comments are legendary. They're legendary because they perfectly encapsulate how completely misunderstood the show's structural innovation was at the time.
They absolutely missed the point. The comments were shockingly frank. People wrote things like, "You can't get too excited about 2 guys going to the laundromat," which showed a total rejection of that nothing premise.
Right.
Others said, Jerry's loser friend George isn't a forceful character, or Jerry needs a stronger supporting cast.
But the most revealing comment, the one about the structure, was the question. Why are they interrupting the stand-up for these stupid stories?
Exactly.
It's hilarious because that precise back-and-forth rhythm, the stand-up setting up the scenarios which are then played out in the stories, that was the entire breakthrough mechanism of the show.
It was the whole point.
The fact that Seinfeld and David later got this memo and hung it in a set bathroom, it suggests they viewed it as a badge of honor, proof of how revolutionary their seemingly simple idea was.
And the show's survival, given this initial response, truly was a minor miracle. The pilot's producer, Castle Rock Entertainment, they actually had another pilot in contention for NBC at the same time, a series featuring the actress Ann Gillian.
Oh, right.
And that pilot, it tested much better with audiences, it received a full season order, and Castle Rock shifted its focus entirely, leaving the Seinfeld Chronicles essentially orphaned and in limbo.
So if the corporate focus shifted elsewhere, how did Seinfeld manage to get even 4 more episodes?
It found one dedicated champion, an NBC executive named Rick Ludwin. He recognized the potential even if the research didn't support it yet.
So he took a risk.
A huge risk. Ludwin managed to scrape together the required funds by diverting money originally budgeted for a Bob Hope television special.
Oh.
Yes. He used those funds to order just 4 more episodes, which, after the show was retitled Seinfeld, became the balance of season 1. And this was, significantly, the smallest sitcom order in the history of U.S. television at the time.
That's an astonishing risk. And even with that small order, the show didn't immediately launch into stardom. It took a while to find its audience.
A long while. It didn't return to the airwaves until May 1990, almost a year after the pilot. It then languished in the ratings, taking a full 3 years until season 4 to finally become a consistently top 5 rated show.
So why did NBC keep it on?
Well, they kept it on the air during those lean early years for a very strategic, commercially driven reason. Research indicated it was exceptionally popular with young male adults.
The key demographic.
With demographic highly sought after and prized by advertisers.
That demographic fidelity bought them the critical time needed for word of mouth and critical acclaim to finally catch up. Now, turning to the later production, we know Larry David served as the primary showrunner for the first 7 seasons, really solidifying that distinctive, unforgiving tone. And then Jerry Seinfeld took over for the final 2, seasons 8 and 9.
And while every element of the show just screams New York City, with all the endless shots of landmarks and street corners, the principal filming was done thousands of miles away.
At the CBS Studio Center in Los Angeles.
Right. They were absolute masters of maintaining the illusion of the Upper West Side. They strategically used numerous establishing shots of real locations, most famously Tom's Restaurant at 112th and Broadway.
Which became the iconic exterior for Monk's Cafe.
Exactly. And even the street scenes, of the actors walking and talking in New York, those were meticulously shot on the New York Street backlot at CBS Studio Center.
I'm interested in the practical constraints of filming. We always hear that Jerry's apartment set was notoriously small, which seems contradictory to the huge scale of the show's success.
It was incredibly cramped. Jason Alexander often joked that if they had known the show would run for 9 years and become such a phenomenon, they would have insisted on a much larger soundstage design. The confined space presented major logistical challenges for the actors and the camera crew. And more interestingly, the scripts themselves often contained minimal physical stage direction.
What did that mean for the actors?
It forced the 4 main actors to collaborate intensely on set, essentially directing each other's physical movements just to choreograph the action naturally and maintain that kinetic energy within the confined space.
That collaboration speaks volumes about the commitment to perfectionism, particularly from Larry David.
It was an obsessive pursuit of perfection. Filming often ran extraordinarily long because David and the cast would not settle for anything less than the optimal reaction. If a joke didn't elicit the desired laugh or timing from the live studio audience, they would stop, often rewrite the joke immediately on the spot, and then perform it again until they achieved the exact rhythm and response they were looking for.
I remember hearing about that. Jason Alexander told a story about the marine biologist.
Yes. He recounted that instance where David spontaneously rewrote an entire monologue, forcing Alexander to memorize and deliver it perfectly just minutes later.
And the commitment to natural laughter was also a key differentiator, right? They weren't faking their response.
Crucially, they were disciplined about the laughter. Laugh tracks were strictly used only for sweetening or matching the sound balance between different camera shots.
So they never added laughter that wasn't there.
Never. They never artificially generated laughter where none occurred, which reinforced their commitment to natural comedic timing and allowed the audience to better appreciate the dry, observational nature of the humor.
This profound commitment to an honest, unvarnished, and anti-sentimental style of comedy, it naturally led to the show's revolutionary philosophical structure.
It really broke the mold of the American sitcom.
And that leads to the famous, almost notorious philosophical guiding principle.
Yeah.
No hugging, no learning.
Exactly. Larry David was adamantly opposed to the moralizing, the saccharine conclusions, and the emotional growth that defined traditional sitcoms.
Yep.
His refusal to let the characters mature, grow, or learn from their mistakes was rigid. They were intentionally designed as arrested, self-centered 30-something singles with vague identities, no roots, and a conscious indifference to morals.
The genius, then, lies in its rejection of pathos. It never offered that customary moment of reconciliation or genuine sentimentality that viewers had come to expect from every other sitcom on television.
They systematically excluded sentimentality. To highlight this, you only need to recall the classic example of the death of George's fiancée, Susan Ross, in The Invitations.
Oh, right, the toxic envelopes.
Yes. Her death, caused by licking toxic glue on the cheap wedding invitations George insisted on buying, elicits virtually no genuine emotion whatsoever from the main characters.
No, they're just annoyed.
They are concerned only with the inconvenience and the logistics. It showcases their inherent callousness and complete indifference to the outside world, a core mantra of the show's philosophy.
Let's break down these 4 pillars of self-absorption, starting with Jerry Seinfeld himself, the fictionalized center of their world.
Well, Jerry served as the observer. He was the voice of common sense and reason amidst the insanity.
Got it.
But that rationality was undermined by his own severe neuroses. He was hyperfixated on minor imperfections, a neat freak, and a mild germaphobe.
His apartment was the physical gathering place, making him the central hub.
Yet he often remained emotionally detached, serving more as a commentator on the chaos than a participant.
George Costanza is often cited as one of the great comic creations of modern television.
George, brilliantly portrayed by Jason Alexander, was based heavily on co-creator Larry David. George is a walking masterpiece of self-loathing, defined by his extreme stinginess, his persistent conniving nature, his pedantic arguments,
And his pathological, effortless lying.
yes, frequently using his alter ego, the fictitious architect Art Vandelay.
And what adds to the comedic incongruity is that despite these severe, crippling shortcomings, George is surprisingly resilient and, on occasion, even wildly successful in his career in dating life.
He even landed a job with the New York Yankees.
Elaine Bennis, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, was essential in providing a strong, flawed female perspective that was pretty rare for network television at the time.
Elaine was typically depicted as the most competent and generally smarter member of the group, yet she was constantly derailed by her own hot temper and terrible judgment.
And her character was a composite, right?
Yes, based on the real-life girlfriends of both David and Seinfeld during their stand-up days in New York. She famously struggled with a rotating cast of disastrous boyfriends and a parade of eccentric, demanding employers,
Mr. Lindman, Mr. Pitt.
and the larger-than-life catalog magnate J. Peterman.
And finally, the unpredictable kinetic force of nature, Cosmo Kramer.
Michael Richards Kramer was heavily based on Larry David's actual neighbor, Kenny Kramer. His trademark idiosyncrasies, like his eccentric projects and general slacker demeanor, were exaggerated for the screen.
Kramer is instantly recognizable by his vertical pompadour, his vintage clothing.
And those trademark energetic sliding bursts into Jerry's apartment.
He's the show's source of pure physical comedy and slapstick.
Absolutely. And though a chronic slacker who never holds a steady job, he is paradoxically exaggeratedly successful socially and often proves surprisingly quick-witted. He really defined the term hipster doofus.
It's clear the show's material was deeply rooted in the writers' lives, fulfilling Seinfeld's original pitch that comedy comes from observation.
Absolutely. The writer's room essentially turned their daily frustrations and experiences into plots. The Revenge, for instance, was directly inspired by Larry David's own brief, frustrating time working as a writer at Saturday Night Live.
Right. And later, in Season 9, The Strike introduced the holiday of Festivus.
A non-commercial, secular holiday, which was directly based on a real bizarre tradition created by writer Dan O'Keefe's father.
The show is remarkably adept at taking highly personal or even controversial subjects and transforming them into comedy through code and suggestion. The Emmy-winning episode The Contest is the pinnacle of that artistic technique.
The contest was based entirely on Larry David's own experience. And what makes this episode a masterpiece of creative boundary pushing is how the show circumvented network taboos regarding subject matter that was considered utterly inappropriate for 1990s primetime TV.
They never actually say the word.
They never say it. They achieved this by substituting the explicit subject matter with a variety of oblique references and veiled code words. It created an episode that was shocking and funny without ever being crude or using forbidden language. The success of that episode proved the show could handle difficult, mature subjects through intelligent implication and wit.
The self-referential nature extended even to industry rumors. The Outing, which famously popularized the phrase, not that there's anything wrong with that, was reportedly inspired by rumors writer Larry Charles had heard circulating around Hollywood about Jerry Seinfeld's sexuality.
This continuous meta-awareness is what pushes the series squarely into postmodern territory. The line between reality and fiction was consistently blurred.
Starting with Jerry Seinfeld playing himself, the stand-up comedian.
Exactly. And the most famous example of this blurring, of course, was the massive story arc that spanned season 4, where Jerry and George pitched a show called Jerry to NBC, describing it, naturally, as a show about nothing.
It was a fascinating case of art imitating life, where the show dramatized their own real-life struggle to convince NBC to commission Seinfeld in the first place.
Precisely. The fictional NBC executives' bewildered reaction to the pilot of Jerry mirrored the initial harsh responses the actual Seinfeld pilot had received years earlier.
That metafiction, that story within a story, is a hallmark of sophisticated, self-aware media.
And we also see this in the numerous fictional movies mentioned throughout the series, like the bizarre French film Rochelle, which further contributes to the show's self-referential quality by inventing cultural artifacts.
And despite being viewed as completely modern and revolutionary, the show drew deep rhythmic inspiration from classic comedy structures. Seinfeld is an avid, lifelong fan of the legendary comedy duo Abbott and Costello.
He cited the Abbott and Costello show as a primary foundational influence on the unique rhythm and timing of his conversational riffs, particularly with George.
The show included several specific, affectionate tributes to the duo.
It did. George Costanza's middle name is Louis, which is after Costello. They also featured recurring characters like Mickey Abbott, and the cantankerous character named Sid Fields in The Old Man was a deliberate tribute to the landlord character in the classic Abbott and Costello TV show.
That connection shows that while Seinfeld broke barriers, its foundation was built on impeccable, classic comedic timing and structures.
Moving from the show's creative philosophy to its massive cultural effects, we have to recognize its immense linguistic legacy. The terms, the phrases, the mannerisms, they didn't just entertain, they provided a new vocabulary for the late 20th century. This linguistic phenomenon was even immortalized in Jerry Seinfeld's best-selling book on humor, appropriately titled Sign Language.
It's more than just famous quotes, though. It's about providing convenient, universal linguistic shorthand for petty frustrations and social anxieties that people had always felt, but never had the precise word for.
That's the key distinction. Terms coined or widely popularized by the show rapidly entered the general lexicon. Think of the phrase yada yada yada, which instantly became the universal shorthand for glossing over unpleasant, boring, or irrelevant detail.
Or no soup for you, delivered with the dramatic flair of the Soup Nazi episode.
Exactly. Or the descriptive terms like regift, shrinkage, and man hands.
Right.
The rapid global adoption of these terms underscores the show's deep, immediate immersion in the cultural consciousness of the 1990s. It wasn't just reflecting culture, it was actively shaping it.
Another unique characteristic, and one that drew significant analysis, was the distinctive role played by real-world consumer products, particularly candy. They weren't just props, they were often pivotal plot points.
Yes, specific products frequently became the central driving mechanisms of entire episodes. We recall Junior Mints, Twix, Juji Fruits, or the PEZ dispenser. But what is crucial to understand here is the creators' unyielding stance that they were not engaging in commercial product placement for profit. They refused to be paid.
This position raises an interesting critical point. While the creators insisted it wasn't paid placement, wasn't there significant discussion that the sheer frequency and brand specificity, like the detailed discussion around a specific candy bar, ultimately served as a massive unintended commercial boon, shifting the advertising paradigm in sitcoms regardless of the creator's stated intent.
Absolutely. That is the necessary critical nuance. Their motivation was strictly comedic and narrative. A writer once explained that for the famous operating room scene in the Junior Mint, they specifically chose Junior Mints over popcorn, which was another option, because they felt the actual sound of Junior Mints being accidentally fumbled into a patient was inherently funnier.
It provided greater comedic dissonance.
Exactly. The choice was purely narrative, prioritizing the absurdity of the moment. However, the commercial effect was undeniable. They proved that deep immersion in specific brand names provided not just authenticity, but immense free advertising.
And despite the creator's stance against paid product placement, the popularity of the show meant that advertisers quickly capitalized on the character's cultural resonance once the series became a massive hit.
The commercial capitalization was immediate and significant. We saw Jason Alexander embodying all the neurotic energy of George Costanza, starring in a memorable Chrysler commercial alongside Leah Coca.
Where he explicitly played on the George Steinbrenner power dynamic.
Right. And Michael Richards leveraged his physical comedy skills, filming a series of highly physical, bumbling advertisements for Vodafone in Australia, replicating Kramer's trademark pratfalls.
Even Jerry Seinfeld himself, accompanied by an animated Superman voiced by Patrick Warburton, who played David Puddy, starred in an American Express commercial.
These extensive partnerships demonstrate how completely the characters had penetrated the public imagination beyond the confines of the sitcom format.
The show also possessed a revolutionary sonic signature that expertly supported its unique comedic rhythm, the theme music composed by Jonathan Wolfe.
Yes. The initial pilot's theme, by a different composer, was a more melodic, traditional piece, but Seinfeld felt it was intrusive and interfered with the rhythm of his stand-up routines.
So Wolfe's solution was to discard the typical theme song and create what he coined an audio signature.
Right.
And this signature was built on organic, almost non-musical elements.
Exactly. It was comprised primarily of slap-based samples, percussion sounds generated from finger snaps, and various mouth noises. The goal was to create an organic, percolating energy that could seamlessly blend with and punctuate the rhythms and speech patterns of Seinfeld's opening monologues.
Rather than competing with them.
Precisely. And what truly set this signature apart was Wolfe's commitment to customization. He created slight rhythmic variations for each episode, tailoring the theme to match the specific dialogue rhythm of that moment.
That level of customized scoring for a sitcom was unheard of. It sounds incredibly labor-intensive.
It was unique and highly specialized, reflecting the show's perfectionism. Every few seconds, the music had to subtly shift to match the timing of a setup or a punchline. It meant that a listener rarely heard the exact same theme twice.
I do recall a small, quick controversy surrounding the music in Season 3.
You're talking about the addition of the scatting backup singers.
That's the one.
Yes, in the note, the first episode of Season 3, Wolfe added scatting female backup singers to the bumper music during the transition spots. Both Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David approved and liked the addition, and 3 episodes were initially produced with this style. But they failed to inform NBC and Castle Rock executives, who were surprised and decidedly unimpressed when the season premiered.
They felt it sounded too commercial.
Like the jingle for the song, Easy to Beat. They immediately requested its removal, meaning The Note is the only episode that features those additional unauthorized elements.
So the show's slow burn eventually exploded into stratospheric success.
By the time Seinfeld wrapped up its run, it had achieved phenomenal and rare status in the ratings landscape.
It went from a last-minute 4-episode gamble to the undisputed ratings champion of American television.
It was utterly dominant. It led the Nielsen ratings outright in seasons 6 and 9 and consistently finished either number 1 or number 2.
Often trading spots with the medical drama ER.
Exactly. Every year from 1994 until its conclusion in 1998. More impressively, Seinfeld holds the extremely rare distinction of being one of only 3 shows in U.S. TV history, the others being I Love Lucy and The Andy Griffith Show, to conclude its entire run while still being the top-rated show on television.
That demonstrates remarkable consistency and cultural peak.
A huge factor in that explosive growth was a strategic scheduling shift made by NBC's programmers.
The scheduling was critical.
The show's popularity received a huge defining boost when NBC moved it to the highly coveted Thursday night slot at 9:30 p.m., directly following the established ratings giant Cheers.
And when Cheers ended its run in 1993, Seinfeld took over the prime 9 p.m. slot.
It anchored NBC's famed must-see TV lineup and solidified those top ratings.
By the final seasons, The show's value was not just cultural, but astronomical in financial terms.
It was unprecedented. By the ninth and final season, the production cost per episode had ballooned to between $3 million and $3.5 million.
And the decision to end the show after season 9 was entirely Jerry Seinfeld's.
It was driven by a desire to go out on top, ensure the quality remained high, and avoid the typical degradation that affects long-running series.
Let's quantify that. NBC offered him a deal that was historic at the time, yet he still walked away.
NBC offered Seinfeld an unparalleled contract to continue. A record $110 million for a 10th season of 22 episodes.
That breaks down to an astonishing $5 million per episode for the lead star alone.
And he declined the offer. He cited a desire to focus on his personal life and avoid the grinding demands of a weekly sitcom production schedule. This decision sent shockwaves through the industry.
It emphasized creator control and integrity over sheer financial gain.
The finale, consequently, was perhaps the most anticipated television event of the late 90s. It was steeped in intense secrecy and drama,
Larry David returned to write the final 75-minute episode.
which was later cut to 60 minutes for syndication. To manage the immense media scrutiny, the producers went to extreme lengths to maintain secrecy. They forced every attendee of the taping, mostly high-level NBC executives and friends of the cast, to sign written vows of silence.
And they even deliberately spread false rumors to the media.
They did, suggesting possibilities like Newman ending up in the hospital or Jerry and Elaine finally getting married.
The actual ending, where the characters are prosecuted for moral indifference, was certainly provocative, to say the least.
It drew a historic viewing audience, estimated at 76.3 million viewers, making it the fourth most watched regular series finale in U.S. TV history.
And the plot.
The plot centered on the characters being tried and sentenced to prison for violating a Massachusetts duty to rescue law based on their systematic indifference and failure to help a victim.
And while thematically consistent with the show's no-learning philosophy, the ending proved polarizing.
It drew mixed reviews from both critics and fans who had anticipated a more traditional or sentimental form of closure.
Post-show, there was one significant controversy that temporarily affected the show's widespread distribution.
That was the season 9 episode, The Puerto Rican Day. It caused a considerable furor after Kramer accidentally burned a Puerto Rican flag during a parade sequence, leading to widespread protests over cultural sensitivity. NBC showed the episode only once during its initial run. To immediately diffuse the protests and media backlash, Seinfeld initially excluded the episode from the syndication package.
But it was eventually added back, uncut, several years later.
Yes, it was.
Then we have the infamous Seinfeld curse that became a major topic of discussion regarding the supporting cast's immediate careers.
The Seinfeld curse refers to the striking phenomenon of rapid cancellation faced by sitcoms starring the other three main actors, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Jason Alexander, and Michael Richards, immediately after the show concluded.
Alexander's two follow-up shows, Bob Patterson and Listen Up, and Richards, The Michael Richards Show.
They were all quickly pulled off the air, often within their first season, reinforcing the perception that the Seinfeld success was a singular, unrepeatable alchemy.
Larry David, ever the realist, vehemently dismissed the entire idea of a curse.
He called the idea completely idiotic, grounding his perspective in industry reality. He said simply, it's very hard to have a successful sitcom.
It's a low-probability endeavor. Most new shows fail, curse or no curse.
Exactly. However, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the one who ultimately and definitively shattered that perception.
Her breakthrough was notable because she consciously chose projects that allowed her to showcase a different type of character and comedic skill set.
She began breaking the curse with The New Adventures of Old Christine, which earned her an Emmy. She even humorously declared the curse broken during her acceptance speech.
And she definitively shattered it with her universally acclaimed, Emmy-winning performance as Selena Meyer in the HBO comedy series Veep.
That role, a highly political, deeply cynical character, secured her 6 further Primetime Emmy Awards for lead actress, proving the issue was simply the difficulty of the medium, not a lingering misfortune.
Even years later, the show maintains powerful cultural relevance, including inspiring extensive academic attention.
It is consistently ranked highly among the greatest TV shows of all time. TV Guide named it the #1 greatest TV show of all time in 2002.
And from an academic perspective,
its unique brand of humor is often analyzed using the incongruity theory of humor, the idea that comedy results from the violation of an expectation given the climate and the characters. We see this brilliantly illustrated when George Costanza, who is defined by his failure and lying, suddenly achieve something monumental, like landing a job with the Yankees or getting engaged to Susan.
That success violates the audience's expectation of him as a loser, creating immediate comic friction.
This philosophical depth led to books like Seinfeld and Philosophy, a book about everything and nothing.
So scholars engage seriously with the four central characters, analyzing their moral dimensions.
They did. Essays delved into topics like George's quest for happiness through perpetual deception, Elaine's moral character under duress, and Kramer's role as an urban seducer in the Kierkegaardian sense. It shows how the show functioned as an unwitting philosophical text.
And of course, the financial legacy is staggering. The value of this intellectual property has proven almost infinite.
The show's distribution legacy is immense. It generated an estimated $4.06 billion in syndication revenue as of 2017. There's a famous anecdote about one investor, Steve Bannon, who calculated what the show would earn if it reached syndication and who later admitted, "We were wrong by a factor of 5."
Wow. The show's appeal proved far broader and longer lasting than any early financial model predicted.
Finally, the cast has repeatedly returned to the material, recognizing the fictional reality they created, though usually in a clever, meta, or self-referential context.
The most significant reunion, of course, occurred in Season 7 of Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm in 2009.
That season revolved around a fictional plot of David attempting to create a scripted Seinfeld reunion show to win back his estranged wife. All 4 main cast members appeared, playing exaggerated, fictionalized versions of themselves.
And supporting actors like Wayne Knight, who played Newman, and Estelle Harris, who played George's mother, and even Jerry Seinfeld's later web series allowed the characters to briefly live on.
Yes. Jerry Seinfeld, Jason Alexander, and Wayne Knight appeared in a scripted spot for Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee during Super Bowl XL8 in 2014. And this spot, later released uncut online, intentionally established Seinfeld's character on the web series as an older, slightly mellowed version of his sitcom persona.
Michael Richards and Julia Louis-Dreyfus also subsequently appeared on the web series.
It reinforced the lasting bond among the actors and recognized the fictional, ongoing reality of the characters they created. In summary, Seinfeld redefined the boundaries of the American sitcom format, not simply through punchlines, but through its revolutionary structural commitment to moral indifference. By strictly enforcing the no hugging, no learning rule and mining humor from the minutiae and moral shortcomings of daily life, it created an unflinching, cynical, and deeply influential lens on the human condition that remains intensely relevant today.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to consider. Given Seinfeld's lasting legacy of transforming social observation and seemingly harmless societal offenses into universal lucrative comedy, if Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld were creating the show today, what currently accepted seemingly harmless cultural phenomena, the way they use social media, the obsession with optimizing productivity, or perhaps the complete dependence on specific streaming services, would their writers seize upon as fodder for their uniquely unflinching lens? Thanks for listening.